Planning and Development Committee meeting for Thursday, November 14, 2019, and to acknowledge that we're meeting today on the traditional territory of the Scheldt Nation. Call the meeting to order at 9:30, and we have an agenda. Somebody to move adoption of the agenda? Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you very much. And our first item, our delegation, and we have Mr. David Reed, Coastal Workforce Housing Society, and with him is Sarah, who I understand used to work here. So that, thank you and welcome back. So, Mr. Reed, you have the floor. Please come forward.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting us to address this group. My name is David Reed, and I'm a resident of Chicanik Road in Half Moon Bay. And I'm also president of the newly formed Coastal Workforce Housing Society. And of course, you know that I'm accompanied by fellow board member Sarah Zacharias. Our society was officially formed July 19th, 2019. For most of a year prior to that, we were a committee of community futures, with members of nonprofits and business people on the coast. Over the last 5 to 7 years, socioeconomic changes on the coast have caused many rental properties to leave the rental market or become short-term rentals or become undesirable. Today, we are not in a rental shortage. We are in a rental crisis. It has evolved to affect policing, nursing, personal care, and our economic backbone. Social and safety services are being critically affected. It is our mandate to work with government agencies to develop multi-unit affordable accommodations that are located on transit routes and walkable to most amenities, but only for workforce. We want to include social spaces for mingling, which can become daycare spaces during the day, another service that is almost non-existent on the coast. Our occupants will have to be full-time employees, and they have to prove it, earning up to the guidelines per type of unit, and of qualifying net worth. Requalifying will be annual, and properties will be professionally managed. We have identified very few properties that would fit the bill, and some of them have logistical challenges. They have to fit the bill of location, size, probably an acre or more, with or near services, and of stable infrastructure. We hope to build buildings of at least 30 units or more for economic reasons. We will be looking to towns to help us with increasing density, lowering taxes, speedy permitting to help keep the costs down per unit. We are in the process of engaging an experienced consultant to help us construct an RFP to BC Housing so that once we qualify, hopefully we qualify, we can expect their financial support. This process, as well as basic architectural and geotechnical services, can be expensive. And while we have done some communal and board member fundraising, we will be applying for assistance funding that we understand is available in modest amounts from a variety of community sources. Once we have a property under contract and an accepted RFP, that's request for proposal, we will go to the business community at large for their financial support, as they will benefit as much or more than the general public. Our service area will extend to working tenants from Egmont to Gibsons, the southern coast. Buildings will hopefully be located in the more populated towns. We plan to build multi-unit modular buildings with preferably surface parking to keep the costs down. Modular is necessary due to limited construction labor on the coast, and it offers a shortened construction time. We have been fortunate to get significant advice from a prominent local builder with experience in this area. We have also been received very well by both Mayors Darnell DeSeegers and Bill Beamish and many of the staff at the towns of Scheldt and Gibsons. The support is gratifying and is very motivational. Our volunteer board consists of myself, Kim Darwin, Glenn McLugan, Janice Iverson, Rick Cooney, Spencer Keys, Mark Yellowly, Clarence Lai, Colin Stansfield, Brian Smith, Chris Hergesheimer, and of course, Sarah Zacharias. My background is in owning and operating a wholesale plumbing and heating firm in the Lower Mainland for 45 years, recently sold, as well as developing commercial and industrial property. This process for me is being able to give back to a society my time and experience that I have come to know, to a society that I come to know and love over the last 15 years. We are looking at this process not just building a building, but building a series of affordable home projects over time to support the integration and growth of younger members of this society to promote the coast's vibrancy and well-being for a long time to come. This is not to say that we will discriminate by age, but generally entry-level workers have the biggest affordability challenges, yet they are the future. Phase 2 of our program may include affordable home ownership, but first we want to get decent roofs over people's heads. So our objective today is to clearly inform the SCRD of who we are, what we want to accomplish, what our challenges are, and ask you for your input in helping us overcome the challenges to achieve success. Thank you for this opportunity, and we welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reed, and I congratulate you on having clarified your vision and working on that, and look forward to working with your association on projects. Are you planning on coming forward to the councils as well with a presentation?
Mr. Chairman, I haven't made a specific plan, but I'd be more than happy to do that.
I think it would be good to hear that both in Gibson's and perhaps Scheldt as well. So I would invite you to do that and contact the office. So
I will do that.
Yeah,
Thank you, sir.
So now the directors, questions. Director Ties.
Yeah, thank you for your initiative, and I think it's great what you're doing. Looking at a precedent sort of in Whistler where where there was a similar problem, probably at an even larger scale, and there continues to be that problem, to be able to house workforce in meaningful numbers. I'm wondering as to what extent we as local government can and should get involved in development of this workforce housing. And Whistler did some bold steps, and I think we may be able to assist if the will is there. I guess this kind of opens a bit of a discussion as to to what extent can the business community help out, because it is in their interest to have that workforce here. But when you're looking at public sector like RCMP and the hospital, there's that role in government that might be able to support those people to find housing. And I think that we as a local government should be able to come to the table and maybe help out as well.
Turning it on and off. There we go. So could we get a copy of your presentation? And the reason I'm asking is, one of the questions I had was, what is the difference between affordable housing and workforce affordable housing? And you laid that out in your presentation. So that would help, because that would give me some guidance around that. One of the things you talked about was net worth. What are you looking for inside of net worth with the people who you're putting in these properties?
Mr. Chairman, one of the aspects, and we were just hearing about Whistler's challenges, and we've studied Whistler's example quite thoroughly. One of the things that they do is if you have a significant amount of assets that either is or could be producing income, they would apply the could be or produced income to your net income and adjust the affordability quotient by that amount.
Yeah, thank you. That helps. I understand where you're going with that. Okay.
And I will send you a copy of this.
Okay. I met with a developer the other day who talked about the fact that in Hawaii, he wasn't sure which islands, but he said one of the requirements they have there is that every multifamily development that goes up has to provide workforce housing as part of that, at least 1 or 2 units or something, and it's a percentage. So it might be something you want to look into, see if there's something there you could bring to us as governments, right? Could be something we could put in.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're saying I know you need land to put a development on. If you had the land, what type of money would you need from the community or whatever to support the development? Or would BC Housing then provide all of the funding for the build if the land was provided?
Mr. Chairman, BC Housing, once they accept our RFP, request for proposal, should be prepared to fund the project. Funding the project isn't the biggest challenge. Making it cash flow properly is. And I think in almost any case, we would need some operating subsidy from BC Housing. Initially, when we look to evaluating a piece of property and coming up with concepts, we may be able to get a little bit of money from BC Housing, but that's where we have to look to the community and ask for some help.
So just a follow-up, just clarification. So what you're saying is actually the prep is what you need the money for.
Correct.
So that you actually have all of it together to be able to go to them. So if you had the land, the rest of it could be covered off by CMHC once you have the proposal together.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Director McMahon?
Yeah, I was wondering how this would operate once it's built, because it has to be managed. And I could easily see, well, I know what I was like when I was 20, this could be quite the party house if you had a lot of young people living there. And so how would you propose to manage the facility, and how would you finance the management of the facility?
Excellent question, Mr. Chairman. We would be hiring a professional property manager. That's one of the reasons why we need about at least 30 units to make that economical. The property management role, aside from screening the people that come in and making sure that they're not party animals, would be more onerous than other property managers where you're just dealing with a tenant, where you're just looking at their finances and looking at where they've lived in the past and what their reputation's like. Here we do have scrutiny on maintaining employment and proving income, so the role is increased a lot more. It's not necessarily all young people that would be living here. There could be, like I said, we wouldn't age discriminate. There could be 50 and 60-year-old people as well, and as long as they're workers, they're qualified. So there always will be in society a certain small segment that might like to let their hair down a little bit, but we would have to, like any other property management process, keep them under control.
Julie?
We have a lot of seasonal workers that come into the area. I was wondering how this would work with your proposal here.
Oh, pardon me, I lost my, Mr. Chairman. We wouldn't turn a seasonal worker down if it suited the occupancy requirements that we had. However, if we're looking at longevity, we do have to try and provide more for stable residents.
where my thought process was is that there is some large businesses that rely on a certain number of seasonal workers every year. They probably would be willing to rent the premises at a increased rent in order to reserve them for their seasonal workers. In Pender, we have instances of them buying housing to do exactly that, and this would have value to them, which would allow them to support you a lot more, I believe. Something probably should look at.
Yes, thank you for that. That's a consideration we could make.
Director Hills?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, you mentioned that the original idea of this came out of Community Futures. So I'm just looking for a little bit of background as how the society came about, and are you using an existing model to base your decisions about, what you're trying to do? So I'm just looking for a bit of context about how the society formed, how it came out of Community Futures, and are you using an existing model from another jurisdiction?
Great question, Mr. Chairman. Originally, a couple of years ago, I got involved with Community Futures as a retired person. Pardon me, unemployed. I'm not quite retired with this project. And I got involved with Community Futures, looking to do mentoring of entrepreneurs. And that's a program that got started but really didn't get off the ground. All the while noticing the challenges that businesses on the coast were having with housing. I was just chatting one day with Janice Iverson and said, this is a problem that's growing. It's not going to go away by itself. Someone's going to have to make it go away. So we just got together with a few people and had an ad hoc discussion about a conceptual way to try and make it happen, and started to do some research. One of the researches was a neighbor of mine's good friends with the lady at Whistler who manages their housing program, and I learned a lot from them, but their program is in nature quite a bit different than ours, because in their case, Whistler owns a lot of property in their town and around their town, and they were able to make these properties available to the business community through building employee housing. The nature of employment at Whistler and the nature of employment on the coast is quite different. So the types of qualifications, rules, regulations, length of tenure and tenancy are different than they are down here. But at the same time, they did have some very good procedural requirements and have recently revised their tenancy requirements, because in some cases they were getting taken advantage of, which is probably another natural human trait on the part of some people. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, so Whistler is the prime model that you're kind of using that exists right now? That's kind of where you would look as an example, sort of?
Well, Whistler is a model. There are other workforce housing initiatives that I've found and read about online. They all have some merits, but then they all have different geographical and economic activities in their society that make what they do different.
Director McMahon?
Would the modular housing be built to step code standards, and would there be an effort to make it super energy efficient, like heat pump heat instead of natural gas?
Mr. Chairman, it's a good question. I don't know what step code is, but it would be built to satisfy whatever codes are in existence. We would want to make it energy efficient to keep the operating costs down. Capital costs aren't so much the problem as the operating costs, because it's the cash flow that's going to be the challenge.
Director Lee?
Actually, I think the north part of our coast is quite similar to Whistler in the challenges they have for workforce housing. There's top end of Half Moon Bay has got a lot of big commercial or tourism, which of course peaks in the summer. I suspect there's more in the whole coast that does that as well, that could use workforce housing out similar to the Whistler model. So I was wondering if you had had a chance to take it to the Chambers of Commerce and the local Residents Association, because I know it's, at least in my area, in the Pender Harbor area, it's a very hot topic every time I attend. And I see you as perhaps being the solution for our problem, so I'd really like to look at it in more depth, at least in the northern part of the coast. I don't know about the others here, but that's my take on it.
Mr. Chairman, the Community Futures has been conversing with the Chambers of Commerce's because they're kind of like sister organizations in the community. And yes, there is a lot of interest and a lot of different types of needs. The seasonal worker issue is a significant one, but practically speaking, us trying to get a venture like this off the ground, we have to pick like a target market, and the target market has to be full-time workers. We did a survey in the month of June and July, trying to survey as much of the business population as we could, because it was a requirement of BC Housing that we be able to prove our need. So we had this student do a survey monkey for us, and the information that came back was very, very interesting. It was, pretty much in line with what our suspicions were, but statistically it bore itself out. And yet there are some people that responded with comments, which comments are as important as the statistics, saying that they have been renting accommodations for the seasonal workers where they can find them. In some cases, they have to go and buy them because they're just really not available.
Director McMahon?
I was just wondering, what is the relationship between the Affordable Housing Society and the Workforce Housing Society, and why do we have two societies?
That's a very good question, Mr. Chairman. We're in the spring having discussions with the Affordable Housing Society about joining forces. They have a couple projects on the go in the Gibsons area, and I think they're looking at potentially another one nearby here. Their focus is wider than ours. We're just narrow on workforce. And our operating methods are a little bit different. So rather than join forces, we decided to operate independently. We respect what they are doing. They've made a very good name for themselves, and they're doing some very good work for the community. We may even partner up with them on a project if they have a capacity issue and provide some extra capacity for them. So we're not antagonistic by any means. We're very complementary.
Director Seegers?
Thank you. Could you partner up on the management piece? Because I think they will have to do some of that as well.
Mr. Chairman, so are you referring to project management?
No, but the management once it's up and operating. Because they're going to have to manage facilities as well.
Our plan would be to use a property management company on a fee basis. And they probably should as well until you get to an economy of scale where you have approximately 100 units. It doesn't make sense to hire your own property manager or start your own property management because it's a pretty significant job. So, no, we wouldn't work with them on property management. It would either be contracted out or hire our own regular manager.
Follow-up?
Yeah, follow-up. I know they've got two projects on the go in Gibsons right now, potentially one just down the road here, and then with yours would probably be sufficient units to actually have your own manager if all go forward, if you're talking 100.
Given that circumstance, we could probably hire and share a person. That's a thought. I hadn't thought of that.
Director Pratt?
Thank you. First off, thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today. And Mr. Reed and I had met during the summer, and just right after I think the society had, or around that time when the society had formed. And it certainly is a very niche housing market that you're looking at with the workforce housing, and it's incredibly needed here for the coast. And I'll echo Director Lee's comments about the seasonality needs within it. I know it is a piece that will have to be looked at eventually, and hopefully with bringing these other housing projects online, the pressure will come off, and maybe the seasonal workers will be able to find more space. I'm happy to hear about the makeup of your board, as well as because you've got some really really great individuals on that board, which is fantastic, and that you're still keeping that connection with Community Futures and the chambers, and keeping all of that networked in. So I'm really happy to see this moving forward. I mean, we've seen this need for a really long time as people are getting more and more priced out of the market. And in my other life as a realtor, I see it all the time where, people, they want to come here for a job, but they can't secure housing. And so it's definitely a need, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this moves forward and seeing how we can help. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think one thing is the board will recall that in the fall or late summer, we actually, the town of Gibson's has taken the lead on a housing needs assessment for the Sunshine Coast. And we are going to be announcing fairly shortly, probably in December, that project moving forward. And on the continuum of housing, I mean, with the whole range that we're looking at, whether it's the shelter housing right to the high-end housing on the coast here. I'm aware, for example, that there's at least one worker camp that I know of on the coast. I came across it in Area E when I was knocking on doors. And that's another option where employers actually provide a worker camp for their workers. And so we need to work together on finding solutions for all the needs on the Sunshine Coast. And that's what this housing needs assessment is going to be doing. So I hope that you'll be able to participate in that need assessment as that unfolds in the next few months. I understand the target date for completion of that is June, so that shortly they'll be announcing a selection of a contractor, consultant to do that work. And I think that would be very beneficial to everybody to have that kind of assessment put out there and publicized, and BC Housing is funding that study. So
very much so, yeah. Yes.
McMahon?
Yeah, just a final word about GHG emissions. Having gone to a climate summit last week, we desperately need to decarbonize our society. So it makes sense to build green and to do it properly, because as you pointed out, the long-term operating costs are the big thing, and it usually doesn't pay to cut corners up front when you're going to be in it for the long term. And the other thing I would point out is that senior governments are starting to trot out various programs, so it may be possible to get some grant money to do, to do high-end green building techniques.
Director Lee.
I was thinking typically about the people that would own big chunks of property that could be suitable for these types of facilities, because I think if I got it right, that's your first challenge, is to get the property, and then the funding will follow. Hence my earlier comments. The big businesses own big properties all over the place. So you're going to have to start working with some of the key people in the area to find those properties. The rural areas aren't like Gibson's and Scheldt, where the municipalities own big chunks of property. In the rural areas, it's owned by Oh, I saw some big squares down there. But definitely in the rural areas, the property's owned by private individuals, and it's usually the same business people that I was talking about earlier. So anyways, that was just why I made the comments I did.
Thank you.
I think one of the early things we need to look at as well is this whole issue of definition. I mean, right now, in terms of our bylaws, and probably Seashells as well, we have described affordable housing. And we have affordable housing reserves, and we have affordable housing requirements on the part of developers to contribute towards affordable housing. We need to expand that definition to include workforce housing. I take, for example, the Gospel Rock project. They are required to put 40 units of affordable housing in that project, and they're going to do that, and they're going to manage that themselves. So there'll be affordable rental units. Now, that'll be affordable because it's under our bylaws affordable, but it's not workforce. And we need to kind of look at those opportunities, because those opportunities exist, as to building those into projects. And at some level, and probably this needs assessment will identify that type of thing that needs to be amended in all of our bylaws to bring that forward. We, for example, can provide support for affordable housing through our affordable housing reserve. That doesn't define workforce housing, unless workforce housing is defined in the bylaw as including, affordable housing is including workforce housing, which we haven't at this point done yet. So those are things that we need to work consistently on the coast, not just one community or another community. All the communities need to have some kind of consistency in that in order to move ahead, and that's what we're looking at doing.
Very good.
Director, go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Chair. As you're trying to connect with businesses and sort of establish their needs and things like that, have you been working with Scredo at all?
Yes, Chris Hergesheimer from Scredo is on our board. He's actually on a year's leave of absence now. He's doing some special traveling for his life. And we have that connection there. There's a chap named, just joined our board temporarily. Yeah, Stansfield. Yes, Colin.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no more questions, I thank you, and we would appreciate a copy of the presentation that we can all look at, and invite you to also come to Gibson's Council and I'm sure to Seashell Council as well. It's unfortunate you have to go all these different places, but you're talking to different audiences as well when you do that.
Thank you very much for allowing us to come visit today. I appreciate some of the very good input and ideas that came through the question period, and we'll keep you informed and be happy to send you a copy of this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda, we're going to move into reports, and I'd like, first of all, a motion to receive all the reports and minutes that are on the agenda, please. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And I apologize to Director Toth. It's one of those things, as this board knows, I need help sometimes. So if you just turn your thing, plate. That's right. Thank you. That helps me tremendously. It's really unfair to introduce new people at the table just before I leave. Thank you. And so we'll move now, Director.
I'd just like to. The Chair, this is Director Toth's first official meeting with the Regional District Board, so I'd just like to...
Yes.
As
the Director, yes, thank you. And you're replacing Director Lamb on the board, so that... and this is probably my last meeting, because next week I've got to be busy in Gibson's, so that Director Kroll, who's my alternate, will be sitting in, and he'll sit in the next meeting, and on December 3rd, Council will appoint him to be the director on the board, and I will sit as the alternate. So I will visit occasionally. So if we can just get through this meeting, I don't get all the names so royally screwed up, we'll be okay. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on. We'll try to move on now, and so the first report on the agenda is Annex A, item 3 on the agenda, and Roberts Creek Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 641.12, 2019, and Senior Planner, Mr. Sao, will you speak to that?
Thank you, Chair. So responding to the board's direction through further discussion with staff, the applicant proposed a modification to the bylaw amendment to include a site-specific provision that restrict the residential development of each proposed new parcel to be one principal single-family dwelling plus one second dwelling with a gross floor area not exceeding 90 square meters. So this provision would reduce the scale of development, provide potential to retain more existing trees, and reduce perceived impact on the neighborhood properties. So staff recommend that the revised bylaws proceed the second reading and a public hearing to be held to gather further community input. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go first to Director Ties on this one.
Thank you, Chair.
So yeah, this is the second time the board is now seeing this application, and the last time there was a suggestion that the applicant and the opponent to the development go away and consider options. The applicant has reduced the ask from 2 full-size dwellings per parcel to 1 full-size dwelling and 1 dwelling unit not exceeding 90 square meters, which is somewhat in keeping of the proposed new bylaw 310 size for auxiliary dwellings. And it's also similar to the density approved for the topping property in the same neighborhood. The neighborhood is largely supportive of the application. The opponent claims that the application contravenes our Roberts Creek OCP, and up until last year that would have actually been the case. Last year, the community chose to add Section 18 to our OCP, and this application does conform to Section 18.3 of the Roberts Creek OCP. And I'll just read it out here. Section 18.3 says, developments exceeding established density limits of the official community plan and or the zoning bylaw and creating a total of 3 lots or less may be considered through an amendment to the official community plan and or the zoning bylaw for areas designated residential outside of village hubs or settlement cluster areas where water supply, solid waste collection, stormwater management, sewage treatment facility, regional fire protection, traffic circulation, and convenient access to major roads and community amenities can all be appropriately provided, and the development design is compatible with the surrounding rural environment. This application does seem to tick all those boxes, and along with the topping case, that was a precedent in using Section 18. The OCP committee and I are still grappling with the vagueness and ambiguity in Section 18 and what it all means for Roberts Creek. But in this case, I believe the application falls fully within the parameters of the intention of this new amendment, and I would like to move the recommendations as presented on page 1, as long as Director McMahon is still willing to be the chair of that one, and the date works for her. Okay.
Okay, moved and seconded. Discussion? Director Hiltz?
Yeah, I think from my point of view, it seems to tick the boxes, and yeah, I'm supportive of the recommendations.
See no further discussion. All in favor? This is rural only. Thank you. So that's passed. Thank you. So that will go now to the public hearing, and that is scheduled to be held on January 14th, 2020 at 7 p.m. at the Roberts Creek Community Hall. Okay, so let's move that one forward. Thank you. Next, moving to Annex B on the agenda. Again, the senior planner. This is for application for subdivision in the Agricultural Land Reserve, ALR 00011, ALC 59614, for part of Elphinstone Crossing Estate Phase 2. Mr. Sale?
Thank you, Chair. So this report provides more information on the proposed trail for the subdivision of lots 14 through 26 of Elphinstone Crossing Estate Phase 2. So prior to adoption of the zoning amendment bylaw to support this subdivision, the applicant solicitor has provided SCRD a letter of undertaking. The letter states that prior to the final approval of the subdivision, the applicant will enter into a covenant with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure and the SCRD regarding the construction and maintenance of a trail along the north segment of a road right-of-way to be dedicated as a community amenity. So the intent of the trail is to connect the north end of the new subdivision road with the existing Creeks Road in District Lot 4451 to the north, which could link to logging roads in the adjacent area and further connects to the foothills of Mount Elphinstone. So with this information provided, staff recommends supporting this subject application for subdivision within the ARR. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to thank staff for the report and the applicant for the patience in letting me kind of understand what's going on with this proposal. And I am supportive of the recommendations. And I have presented the chair with, in planning language, this is adding a belt and suspenders to the recommendation, which was something from the planner's report previously, which is about the home plate issue. Would you like me to read that out? So the recommendation would be supported subject to the following condition: A, designate a residential area called the home plate, approximately 0.2 hectares by covenant, on each lot to limit residential development and mitigate interference with agricultural operations. And the SCRD's conditional support for the application be forwarded to the Agricultural Land Commission. So this was a part of the planner's report from October about the home plate. So we're just incorporating that into the recommendation.
Thank you. And I have passed that along to your fellow rural directors so they can see that resolution, that recommendation. So are you moving the recommendations with that addition?
Yes, I would, yes.
Okay. You have a seconder? Seconded. Discussion? Director McMahon.
Interesting approach. I'm just going to once again reiterate my opposition to developing residential properties outside of our service areas. I am very skeptical that these properties would ever be used for farming, anything other than views. And so with respect to an interesting addition to the recommendations, I'm going to vote against.
Thank you. Other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Thank you. Thank you very much. So moving forward. Thank you. Did you want your vote recorded? Yes. Okay, please. Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is Annex C, and again with the senior planner, the development variance permit, DVP 00050 in electoral area A. And Mr. Sao, again, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the SCRD received an application for development variance permit to vary the minimum setback from the natural boundary of the ocean from 7.5 meters to 1.5 meters for the proposed new dwelling to be located at 12963A Oyster Bay Road. So there is an existing cabin located on the foreshore adjacent to the waterfront portion of the property. The cabin is under an order by the province to be removed. The applicant intends to remove this cabin from the foreshore and build a new house with the same footprint on the waterfront portion of the parcel. Due to its topography, the applicant considered the upland portions unsuitable to build this house. Instead, the existing septic system will be relocated further away from the water to the upland portion of the parcel. The portion considered buildable by the applicant is the waterfront portion, which has limited space and needs a reduction in setback from the ocean. So staff recommends support for this application subject to the applicant obtaining a development permit to address coastal flooding and coastal slope issues, and to determine whether or not the proposed 1.5 meter setback can be safely accommodated. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll go to Director Lee.
Yes, I'm quite familiar with this particular issue, and I'm definitely in favor of the recommendations. I think it's a good solution, and it's keeping with the character of that whole area. All the other residents are built in a similar fashion along there. It's kind of a shame that the existing house must be taken down. It's historic, but they did add to it when they shouldn't have. So I guess this is what happens when that does occur. So yes, I'd like to propose that we accept the recommendations and go forward.
Okay, you move the recommendations. Do I have a seconder for the recommendations? Seconded. Discussion? Director Hiltz?
Thanks, Chair. So I understand that there's a legal dispute going on this property. So does the DVP run with the land, or is it based on the applicant? Is one part of the question.
Planner?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. So the legal proceeding is not related to the variance application, and the variance is related to the property, is not related to the owner. It runs with the property, not the owner. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Ties?
Yeah, my question is whether the SCRD could incur any liability for approving a dwelling in the foreshore area, considering that we know with fairly reliable certainty that there will be a sea level rise in the future, and that the sea level rise may in fact impact that building within its lifespan. And so that's sort of the question that I have. I think looking at the plans, there's a 2 and a bit meters above sea level right now that this property is at, which, depending how well this house is built, it could be within the realm of flooding. So, yeah, that's my question.
I'll turn to staff. Who would like to comment on the liability question?
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, I would like to clarify that this variance does not permit a house to be located on the foreshore. It only varies the setback from the ocean. So this house will not be located in the foreshore. So the existing cabin, which is in the foreshore, will be removed. So in order to address flooding concerns, so as a condition for this variance application, the applicant will be required to apply for a development permit to address the ocean flooding and coastal slope issues. And as part of the development permit process, a safe harmless covenant will be required to mitigate the liability and risks for the SCRD. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lee?
I understand, though, that this once it goes back, it will be the same height above the ocean level as the other building permits we approve that are a sufficient distance back from the ocean. In other words, it's going to be high enough to meet everybody else's standard from the medium water level. Is that correct?
Mr. Sale?
Thanks, Chair. So the flood construction level will have to be determined by a geotechnical report. So at this point, we don't know exactly how high that should be, but it has to be sufficient to meet geotechnical standards for the building to be safe. Thank you.
Director Seegers?
Thank you. I think you just answered my question. When we look at the recommendations, it indicates that we needed to go have them provide something to us to indicate that if we allowed the variance of 1.5 meter setback from the boundary, that it would address Director Tai's concerns regarding coastal flooding. And you indicated it would be a geotechnical report that would need to come forward. So if that geotechnical report came forward and said, no, this is not back sufficiently from the ocean to mitigate flooding issues, then this development variance permit would not be given out. Is that correct?
Thanks,
Mr. Sile?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Director Hiltz?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's on page 15. It's I'm just looking for staff, and I understand DVPs, the boards and councils have a lot of discretion on these, and so I just need a little bit of context about what not necessarily in this situation, but in the future, what is a negative impact? What would you see as a negative impact? Why a DVP would not be issued? So just in planner language, I guess, maybe, or something like that.
Mr. Sale?
Thank you, Chair. So based on our analysis, there does not appear to be any obvious negative impacts. The requirement for a geotechnical report will make sure the flooding issue will be properly addressed, and any slope stability issue will be also addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Hiltz?
So follow-up negative impacts would be impacts to neighbors or to the foreshore or upland, or just what's the scale of a negative impact?
Mr. Sale?
Thank you, Chair. So the proposed structure will still have to meet all the other setback requirements. For example, setback from the side property line and setback from the road. So in that respect, there is no apparent negative impact on the neighbors. And as far as the potential impact to the ocean, the development permit will address proper flood construction level, and in terms of environmental impacts, there are currently no development permit area specifically for that type of development activity near the foreshore. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lee?
Yeah, it's quite interesting how they determined how far to move the house back and how high to make it, because it also there's the storm factor as well as the tide factor. Yeah. And in this case, it's in a very protected bay, so it's there's a lot of things that kind of make it easier to make the decision. It's not out on the open ocean.
Thank you. This has been moved and seconded. Recommendations. Further discussion? Okay, I call the question. All in favor? And that's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll move now to Annex D, and this is the provincial referral CRN 00088 for log handling storage for ANA Trading Limited. And see planner Julie Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Staff received a referral for a proposed new license of occupation for a log handling facility near East Glacial Creek in Jervis Inlet, a location which is just south of Deserted Bay and is 2.5 hectares in size. The proposed location is in the Scheldt Nation territory within Electoral Area A and outside the official community plan boundaries. The upland area of this proposal is zoned rural resource, or RU2, which permits the types of proposed uses. In this area, there is no zoning over the surface of the water. Staff scanned the potential for ecological and cultural impacts resulting from the proposal and have made a variety of recommendations for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And turning again to Director Lee, I'm sure you've had a thorough study and walked the land, and you know exactly what's happening there.
Yes, that's true. I am quite familiar with that area. I used to log just a little further up. So I'm in favor of this. I would wish that we could have got it to the APC committee prior to us having to make a decision. Hopefully we can figure out a way of making that happen. I do understand, though, that any comments they have will be forwarded, and so they will get a chance to look at it. That's my comments. I think there's some more discussion.
Director McMahon?
Yeah, it's the timing thing that concerns me. The date on the report is August, and on the next log booming ground application, the letter to the SCRD is dated, I think it was September the 9th. So it seems like we are not able to turn these around quickly enough to get them to the Natural Resources Advisory Committee and the APCs. And that's, upsetting to the volunteers on those committees because they feel like they're not really being meaningfully consulted when we already approve things before they've even looked at them. So I'm just wondering if we can receive these in a more timely manner.
Okay, Mr. Hall?
Thank you, Chair Beamish. Staff hear and share the concern about timing related to referrals, and would note that with these two specific files, which are 2 of 10 that came in the last about 7 weeks, they were received directly from applicants, not through the province. Both came in complete, and so the dates that are on some of the documents may not reflect when SCRD had enough information in order to be able to proceed with analysis. And in light of this new approach that the province is applying to referrals, where applicants are now contacting staff directly and putting the regional district in the position of having to chase information in order to be able to complete reasonable analysis, staff are looking at ways to perhaps streamline our process, reflecting the fact that SCRD is not responsible for administration of things like the species at-risk provisions or certain marine environmental regulations, and we'll look for opportunities to improve our process such that we can bring forward information in a more timely way. Also, the regional district's not in control of the timelines for referral, which are often what drive the need to bring forward recommendations in order to meet the province's timeline, which is typically 30 days, perhaps with a 30-day extension granted. And so, while not the preferred method, having follow-on comments from our advisory committees has proven an effective way to at least ensure that we are benefiting from the hard work of those volunteers. Thank you.
Go to Director McMahon, then.
Yes, so I take it that the province is basically downloading more work on the regional district. Would that be a fair summary of the situation?
Mr. Hill? Mr. Hall?
Thank you for the question. I guess with regard to these two specific referrals, that would seem to be the case as they came in incomplete. That situation is not unique to ones that come directly from applicants. There's a range of quality that is received regardless of the channel through which it is provided.
Director Pratt.
Thank you. I'm along the same lines as Director McMahon. If this is a trend that we are seeing from the province with referrals that are being directed to us with policy changes that are being implemented by the province, which puts additional pressure on us, then I would like to, I'd like staff to let us know so we can push back as the political body and make sure that the province understands that this is not acceptable, that the downloading of services, downloading of referral costs, I mean, we're seeing this in other areas as well. And we can, as a board, we can certainly do some advocacy around that. So if this is just, if maybe it's just an informal conversation with the CAO that he can have with managers and come back. I don't know if you want a motion to anything like that. I don't think that's necessary at this point. But I think this is definitely a conversation that we need to have along these lines.
Director Lee?
I did note the change in process, and I did talk to a few people in my area about it. They actually were in favor of the change in process, and they could see where it would speed it up because it doesn't sit at a government desk and then come to us and then go back and sit at the government desk again before the decision will be made by our new joint board under the foundation agreement. So it seems like it's a process that should speed it up for the applicant, but we definitely need to have the time to follow our usual process that we would use if it had come the other way around. So I believe we need to get more than the 30 days in order to respond. And if it's going to cost us more, well, my assumption was it wouldn't cost us more, that we probably didn't get those kind of information from the government. But if that's incorrect, then I'm liable to entirely change my perspective on this.
Question to staff first. Mr. Hall, do you use tracking sheets on these? Is this type of application when they come in and when additional information is required provided so that you can deflect some of the criticism of that would fall on staff or the regional district?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Yes, staff track all planning files, and so this is included in our tracking of work coming in. At this time, and I guess reflecting that some of these changes to process are relatively new, I can't share any particular statistics about changes or trends, but would observe that it has been quite a busy fall for referrals from the province.
Director Hills?
Yeah, I'm going to continue on the theme here. So from an application processing point of view, does the regional district recoup any application costs through this referral process?
Mr. Hall?
No, we don't.
Director Lee?
I was anticipating that they're going to, matter of fact, they do state that there probably will be more situations where this process will occur, that we get it first and then it moves on. I was thinking probably any of the uses of Crown land might be following this process. I believe we've actually asked to be more involved. So.
Director Pratt?
Yeah, and it's interesting as I'm sitting here listening, and I'm like, we've asked to be more involved, and now I want to be careful about how we push back. But because I don't want us to lose our voice in the process. So, but I just want to make sure the process is efficient and considerate of what we are as a government, and that there is no downloading of costs and services onto us without without compensation.
Okay, we'll deal with the recommendations. And sorry, Director Lee, did you want to say something else?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations as presented.
Thank you. And seconded? Seconded. Any further discussion on these recommendations? Seeing none, all in favor? That's approved. Does the board wish to make another recommendation with regards to monitoring and reporting back to the board on the process of these kinds of applications over time, or to the CAO, do you feel a recommendation is resolution is required for that?
Thank you, Chair. I believe the direction from the discussion is quite clear, and the staff can track that, and we can report back if it becomes onerous.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So we'll move on then to Annex E, and this is the provincial referral CRN 00095 for log handling storage at Unilateral Area F. And again, Julie Clark, planner.
Thank you, Chair Beamish. Staff received a referral for an extension of an existing lease at Avalon and Bear Creek, which is Interfor's existing log sort in Thornborough Channel in Area F. The proposed expansion of 5.8 hectares for a total area of 14.9 hectares. Areas within the Squamish Nation territory, within Area F, and within the Twin Creeks Official Community Plan area. The proposed uses are aligned with the current OCP land use designations. The upland area has a land use designation of industrial, and the area over the water is designated marine industrial. The proposed expansion aligns also with permitted uses. The zoning for the upland is Industrial 5B, and the surface of the water is zoned W2, which permits a range of industrial uses. Staff once again scanned the potential for ecological and cultural impacts resulting from this proposal and have made some further recommendations for consideration. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I'll go to Director Hills.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks staff for the analysis. And it's very similar to the previous one. I am supportive of the staff recommendations, and thank you for the analysis. I guess I do have one question, and it's sort of a two-part. That the amount of information that the application seems similar, but the criterion within the application seem different. Going underwater, diving, and things like this versus something else. Is this, each application will be slightly different in terms of their requirements to move the application forward? That's one question.
Ms. Clark?
Thank you for the question. It is not entirely clear to staff how the province considers deep water versus shallow water applications and what differences may exist in the criteria or requirements for applications.
Director Taz.
I'm just wondering if this application would look different, or would there be any different requirements if this was a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, and if yes, in what way would it look different? Now, of course, I don't know if staff has the answer to that, but it's just something that I was wondering.
Who's going to say thank you for the question? Ms. Clark.
Thank you very much for that question. In short, staff are not sure at this time. This question may best be directed to UNESCO and also to the province. What I am able to offer at this time is that our understanding is that biosphere reserves implement the UN Sustainable Development Goals through collaboration and engagement across communities and sectors. And while the UN Goals of Sustainable Development are a consistent focus across all biosphere reserves, the implementation appears to be unique to each one, depending on the collaboration development within existing regulatory frameworks. Thank you.
That was a great answer. Thank you. Director McMahon.
I was just wondering if we ever get any follow-up on these, because we get these applications for docks or booming grounds or whatever way out in the hinterlands, And we never hear back? Were they approved, or are there issues with them, or anything? Do we?
Director Ties, did you want to answer that question?
No. No, I wanted to add to it, and that is, yes, and is there any kind of follow-up whether our recommendations were in fact followed in the end?
Okay, who would like to respond to that one? Julie Clark, thank you.
Thank you. There are occasions where staff do hear back from the province, particularly when there are questions back and forth between the applicant and the province after they've received our recommendations or other recommendations. Usually those interactions are seeking to clarify or seeking further information. We sometimes in that process hear about the outcome, and often not.
Thank you. Director Hiltz?
Yeah, one final question. This is page 106. This is about what prompted this from the company's perspective is that a previous agreement changed and the cost of renting went up 400%. So I'm just wondering from staff's point of view, are they seeing this as a trend in the Howe Sound area, as this land becoming, or the water land becoming more valuable, and is there any reference, would this translate into the hillside area? Is this something we're going to be expecting more? Is this change in the market? Is this like a market condition? I guess is the question.
Planner? Or?
It has been approximately 1 year since staff have had another log handling referral from the province in Howe Sound, so unable to comment on trends at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Hall?
Chair, if I could add, at Hillside, within the water lease that has been granted by the province to SCRD, the rent formula is prescribed and relates. There are a number of formulas that exist in that head lease for determining rents, but they are prescribed by the province and set by formula. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Hills, did you want to move the recommendations on page 96, 97?
Yes, I'll move those recommendations.
Do a seconder? Seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? And that's approved. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Moving next to Annex F, and this is Parks Planning Coordinator. This is the provincial license 241525 for Dan Bosch Park, and I believe that's in Area A. And who will present that? Mr. Hall, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In 1983, SCRD was granted a Crown License of Occupation for the area on the eastern edge of Ruby Lake in Electoral Area A, known as Dan Bosch Park. The park is heavily used and includes parking, a beach, picnic tables, swimming area, an outhouse, and trails. It's also a jumping-off point for a scenic portion of the Suncoaster Trail. The current license expires at the end of this year and is due for renewal. Regular operations at the park include weekly site inspection, light maintenance. We have a caretaker contract seasonally for management, and annually through a permit application process, sand is placed on the beach. And as well, looking forward, a management plan is anticipated for the park and is a requirement for renewal. And if the SCRD board directs staff to renew the license, the application will be prepared and submitted in 2020. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lee, do you wish to comment?
Yes, Dan Bosch Park is quite a popular park with everybody on the coast. It's well used by everybody. The residents around the lake actually support it, and they would prefer that it was made bigger and it was just one, of course. But yes, there was some issues about fires that weren't addressed quickly enough, but that'll probably, I'm assuming that'll be part of the management plan. I read about how they were proposing to do it in the presentation here, so Yeah, I'd like to put a motion forward that we accept the recommendations and go forward as.
Do we have a seconder for the recommendation? Seconded. All further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. That's approved. Thank you. General Manager of Planning, and this is the Scheldt Aquatic Center Pool Shutdown Update. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Chair. This report follows up on a spring 2019 discussion about optimizing the scheduling and rental rates at SCRD aquatic facilities to support youth athletics. Staff have worked with the Chinook Swim Club to update our rates and also lane rental and scheduling opportunities. One issue discussed previously was changing the annual maintenance shutdown time to better align with the competition schedules, while managing the risk that the empty pool basin, which would be drained for maintenance, would float due to excessive groundwater pressure, posing a risk to the facility. As noted in the report, through subsequent dialogue and agreement with the swim club, and having sought input from engineers, staff do not recommend changing the shutdown from the current June timing. And so the report is an update on the file and recommending that we continue on with the status quo. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
I'll move the recommendations as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Seconded. Further discussion? Director Pratt.
I'd just like to thank staff for the conversation with the community and the user groups, and say thank you for doing that. And that increases the communication with the community, and we love that. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Not you, Director A. Sorry. Put your hand down. Director Lee. That's right. Yeah. Nice try. Okay. We'll go now to Annex H, and this is for the potential partnership with the Dead Boat Disposal Society, and back to Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Chair Beamish. This summer, the Dead Boat Disposal Society appeared as a delegation to request collaboration with SCRD on the identification and removal of derelict boats through the Transport Canada Abandoned Boat Program. As requested by the board, staff have completed research on potential program delivery and funding models for working in partnership with the Society in 2020. Part of the research included a review of how other local governments, including regional districts, are supporting this type of work, and this is provided as an attachment. Options are grouped into two activities: identification of boats and removal of boats, reflecting the different authority and resources required for each of those two types of tasks. For an inventory of boats, it's possible to partner with the Society through the Regional Planning Service, and this approach would mirror what has been done in some other jurisdictions. A partnership with a local community group could also, or alternatively, be sought, perhaps leveraging grant and aid as part of the project. And the Dead Boat Society could also apply for a grant and aid for a project on the coast. For removal of boats, community partnerships supported with grant and aid, as was recently successfully done in Pender Harbour, may be possible, and other grants may be available to match the Transport Canada funding that is available to the Dead Boats Disposal Society. Incremental resources may be required depending on the direction selected, and based on further direction from the board, staff will consider if a budget proposal is recommended.
Okay, I think we got the gist of it. Director Seegers.
Thank you. So my question is not whether or not we should partner with them. I think they're a great organization, and they're one of, I think, the only one on the coast that's actually looking to deal with this, and have come forward with a very viable way to access the funds and move the dealing with this derelict boat situation forward. What I do have questions about is about determining jurisdiction and cost. Given regional planning is a function that all of us pay into, how would we deal with things like Porpoise Bay, trail, the front of trail, given that the District of Scheldt is already dealing with those, and we would also be looking at partnering with them on those, but then also paying into the others. So I'm not saying we're not up for this, I'm just saying we need to be clear about how we would deal with this situation given the overlapping jurisdictions.
Director McMahon?
Yeah, I'm wondering, obviously the work needs to be done, and there are a lot of groups already doing pieces of this work, including the District of Scheldt, the Sea Change Marine Conservation Society, and which has worked on Scheldt Inlet, and the Ocean Watch Task Force, which has worked on identifying derelict vessels in Howe Sound, and there's been a bunch of work done up in Pender Harbor. So my real question is, who should lead this parade? Do we have the capacity to take this on at the SCRD? We seem to be a little busy. Do we want to do this? I'm really, I'm uncertain about how we should go about this. I'm wondering if maybe we should, either us or District of Scheldt or somebody should host a meeting of all the parties who have been working in this area to talk about a coast-wide strategy. Any other thoughts? Pender Harbor?
Director Lee?
Yes, I have a couple thoughts about the whole thing. I'm not sure that we could figure out how to use staff, how to appoint staff to do each project, because there are multiple projects in multiple phases at multiple times. The government themselves already has an inventory of vessels. We've given it to them several times. Of course, it changes as people move their boats around, but it's kind of a moving target. My concern is that we could use help in understanding how to apply for funds and where to apply for funds and where we might get them. And when I say we, I'm talking about the group that's doing it in Pender Harbor. Once they have the funds, though, they're quite willing to hire the contractor, manage the contractor, get the darn thing done. And I quite like it because we keep the money on the coast. They generally will look for contractors on the coast. And each job has unique challenges, and so it won't be the same contractor all the time. If it's a little one, you can get a low cost and do it quickly. If it's a big one, bigger cost, takes more. And you can't deal with them all at once either. You can't just have someone swoop in and make the problem go away. It's an ongoing problem. And eventually, after we destroy enough boats, people will figure out not to bring them in, but that's going to take a while. So those are my thoughts. I sure hate to turn down an offer of help, but I can't see how it will help unless they're willing to bid on the jobs with us, and when it's time for us to remove, they might come in and sweep in and bid on the job and maybe do it if they're a low-cost provider. That's my thoughts.
Director Hiltz?
Thanks, Chair Beamish. One of the things that I'm hearing is that the salt water is one of the murkier places of where jurisdictions overlap. The one thing is, when Sheila Malcolmson was here talking about dead boats, it was conceived as a waste management, not a planning issue. So I'm not sure if planning is the best place if we were to support this. It may be in waste management because it's ultimately a pollution and a waste issue. And the other piece is that of our neighboring jurisdictions, the Islands Trust has the largest chunk of water boundary within their jurisdictions in the Salish Sea. And we've got an intergovernmental coming up with the Islands Trust next week, I believe. So, and they are active. They have an active page on their website about derelict boats, and they're doing the inventory, and there's inventories from 2014 for Howe Sound, all these different areas. And so I'm wondering about discussions with Islands Trust on that. And then the most crazy idea is what is the largest service that you could actually have? Could like every regional district within the Salish Sea participate in a service? Like we all put in 1 cent, this reminds me of the Municipal Finance Authority amount that you put on. Could you have a service for the whole Salish Sea? And I'm just wondering if staff knows, like, what's the biggest service area that's out there?
So cross-boundary service, what you're talking about, yeah. CAO.
I certainly don't have the definitive answer, but I mean the service area would be restricted to just our corporate boundary. However, we can do service agreements with neighboring municipalities, neighboring regional districts. The charter allows us to do that. So I'm not sure if that answers the question or not.
I wonder as well, given that we're all part of AVICC and ICE-T, whether there's some opportunity in there to look at this as kind of develop a kind of a service that others would want to be part of in terms of finding solutions. I haven't discussed this with Gibson's Council. I would like to take this report and share it with them as a starting point. Councillor Kroll has talked about the idea of maybe a land-based operation to pull boats onto and to demolish them. There are possibly other ideas out there, but it does seem like something we should be talking about jointly, either at a workshop. The intergovernmental is a good place to start that conversation, and then maybe adjourn it to direct it to another venue, because it's not on the agenda right now, so it wouldn't take a lot of time, but we would just have to kind of bring it up as an idea as we go around the table, perhaps. So, yes, Theo.
One that does come to mind is the Island Corridor Foundation, whereby the regional districts got together to acquire the E&N Railway right-of-way on Vancouver Island and jointly set up a board to govern that. So that was one model that's been used that I'm aware of.
Director Lee first, then Director Pratt.
There is that ongoing problem that you just described, and that is once you've got possession of the boat and you've developed a means to move the boat, where do you actually dispose of it? It would be nice to have a place where it wasn't done in the water and there's chances of pollution and debris escaping, such as we did with one of the boats in Pender. Maybe we could partner. Seashelt's got a great place. They already have a boat there. But I would definitely think that that's the waste disposal aspect of it is something we should look at further.
Director Pratt?
Some interesting thoughts here around collaborating together, and I mean the Scheldt issue, and I'm sure Director Seegers will comment on that when she gets a chance, because they might not be available to use funding now, but because it's out of the water. So I definitely would like to take this further into our other members of AVICC and have that conversation further. Director Hiltz and I are meeting with Islands Trust next week, and I've made a note to put it on our agenda to discuss there. But I'll reach out to some of our other counterparts and in the AVICC area and see what where we could find some partnership, or see if there's what the will is for setting up something.
Director Seegers?
Thank you. So one of the questions in this report from staff is, do we put forward any kind of budget request this time around in this budget? And it sounds like that we need some more work to do behind the scenes to find out what that looks like and how we'd move it forward. So probably premature on staff's. I mean, thanks for bringing that forward, but I think there's more work to be done before we go that direction.
The report has been received, and there's no recommendation further on that, so that Director Seegers?
I think it would be wise to bring the various parties together, at least on the Sunshine Coast here, including the Scheldt Nation. So I recall having a meeting, it's got to be about 2 years ago now, with between the District of Scheldt and the Scheldt Nation with regards to derelict boats in the inlet. So it's very much on their radar as well. We could potentially look at, at least discuss some of these issues that we have around who's funding, how we're funding. I know John Devison, our head of Public Works, has been in contact with the Stead Boat Society as well, and has worked with them, finds them really good to work with. They're the people who actually will handle all the funding, so he knows what they do. So we could potentially drag him along and say, how does that fit in as well, without having to actually have this organization there. Okay, so we could make that happen.
Did you want to make a recommendation to that effect?
Make a recommendation. And why don't, do you want regional district to set up the meeting? Do you want, we could task the CAO with going out and making something happen, getting a meeting together?
That's a great motion.
Okay.
Ask the CAO to make something happen.
Yes.
CAO or CAOs collectively?
CAOs collectively,
collectively.
Yes.
Okay,
I think they'll need to discuss what the issues are. I think you've got a good handle on that.
Yeah.
And then look at the various parties that we should have at the meeting to discuss disposal of derelict boats and a potential partnership with the Dead Boat Disposal Society.
Okay. Recommendation. Seconded. Further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. That's passed. So thank you. For our new CAO, you might have to draw him a picture of a boat, so he knows it's coming from Mackenzie. I'd like to welcome our Manager of Protected Services, Mac Trite, and to lead conversation on the next issue, Annex I, and that's the Community Resiliency Investment Program grant application. Thank you, and welcome.
Thank you.
Go
ahead. Yeah, so this is a grant through UBCM. The purpose of it is to achieve funding to put together a community wildfire protection plan. That plan will then serve as the basis moving forward for forest field mitigation work, fire smarting, and so on. There's two different grants. One's at the $25,000.
Off again?
Okay. One's at the $25,000 threshold, one's at the $150,000 threshold. We're able to go for the higher amount because we have some high-risk areas, specifically up in Egmont within the Sunshine Coast Regional District. So we're in contact with the contractor to get an approximate cost on what the plan would be, and that's the number they came back with, so that's what we were applying for in the grant.
Director Seegers?
Thank you. I've been waiting for this to move forward. I know as a community we're concerned about the interface between our residents and the forest around us. We like it, but it's also a threat. So I'd like to see this moving forward. I would move the recommendations with one addition, and that a request for letters of support be forwarded to the Town of Gibson, Scheldt Nation, and the District of Scheldt. It's in the report, but it's not in the recommendations. So I'd like to add that in, and then I'll move those recommendations.
Seconded. Further discussion? Matt, how does this take into consideration the grant that the Town of Gibson has already received? Are you rolling that in to this?
I believe that one, from what I understand, they had to spend that by March of 2020, and so we're not going to have our grant by that time. Okay. So I'm not sure how that would fit.
I know discussing with our CAO, he'd asked the Chief Michaels to work on that project with the Town of Gibson. So,
yeah, as far as part of this one, like I said, it's my understanding was they had to spend it by the spring, and we won't have our money by then. So,
thank you. Scheldt?
Is there a timeline on letters of support from the other local governments that is needed?
When would you need those letters?
So the application has already gone in to meet the deadline. Letters of support can follow, but obviously the sooner the better.
Thank you. I'll bring that forward to them. Director McMahon?
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear that when we get the grant and we do the study, that it would primarily be a study of the risks, and then that information would build up into our emergency program. Like, that's because things like evacuating populations, it's not just fire. You could have a lot of reasons to be evacuating populations. Just curious.
Mm-hmm. It's somewhat two separate things. So this particular grant is going to be specifically for wildfire. And then as part of the emergency plan, there are other grants available we'll be applying for in the spring, one specifically for evacuation planning, to put together an evacuation plan.
Thank you. We have Director Lee.
This plan will also encompass our parks as well as our wildlands?
It'll encompass the entire, basically the entire Sunshine Coast area. I don't have the map. For our lunch and learn, I'm going to have a map available, and I can probably go into more detail about exactly which areas it'll include.
Thank you. Been moved and seconded with the additional recommendation that letters of support be requested from the District of Scheldt and the Town of Gibsons. And the Scheldt Nation, yes. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. That's approved. Thank you. Board, we've been here for since 9:30. Do you wish to take a break or plow through? We'll take 5 minutes. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Moving on to the minutes. And first of all, we'll deal with Annex J, which is the Policing and Public Safety Committee minutes of October 17th. They have been received, so that discussion within the minutes, looking first at recommendation number 1, and that is that the Sunshine Coast Policing and Public Safety Committee recommend that staff identify the gaps in legislations, bylaws, permits, licensing pertaining to the regulatory jurisdiction of the regional district in respect of cannabis. Has to be added to that recommendation. What would Director Seegers?
I'll move adoption of that, and then following, I have a comment or a question to staff.
Okay. Do you have a seconder for that? Seconded. Okay. Discussion.
I wonder if staff have sufficient information to understand what we're asking for here. I don't know if I don't recall. I can actually look at the attendance. Who was actually in the meeting? I don't think so. What we were looking at inside of this was the fact that there are different rules around medical marijuana and recreational marijuana, growing, etc. And we're looking at what the regional district can do with regards to bylaws, permits, and licensing, etc., because of the impact on fire safety. For example, the medical marijuana licenses are not actually published. So what the RCMP indicated was that even they don't know. They actually, if they come across a facility, they actually have to phone or contact Health Canada or whatever to find out whether or not it's a legal operation. And I know in the District of Scheldt, we don't know who they are, and we have no means to determine that they're following building bylaws, safety concerns, any of those kinds of things. So what we're looking at is what are the concerns that we have as a regional district, potentially municipalities as well on the Sunshine Coast, so that we can look at what advocacy we need to do, potentially with Health Canada, federal government, provincial government, etc., to tighten up some of these to ensure that they're addressed across the country.
Director Ties, then Director McMahon.
Yeah, my thoughts in that regard are also the things like with water usage and where we've got possible, once all the meters are installed and we're looking by pay by use, then these people should probably be charged on an industrial scale rather than a residential scale. And those are the kind of loopholes that I would like to close as well.
Director McMahon?
Yeah, and safety for the firefighters entering a building, because if they don't know that it's a grow-up, then that's risky for them.
So is the resolution that's been moved and seconded sufficient to capture that conversation, or do we need to add in there anything relative to those details, or it's not specific to firefighting, it's not specific to water or anything else like that? CIO?
Through the chair, yes. I think I was in attendance at the meeting, so I did get the background. We have had a number of legal sessions, we being staff, on this very topic, and there's quite a wealth of information out there now, given the years that have now transpired with local governments and cannabis. So I think it's an all-encompassing toolkit that you're looking for.
Thank you. So, Director Pratt?
I just want to make sure that we were, because the corporate officer was in our agenda review yesterday, and it is a very broad recommendation that we've made. So, is it too broad? Is it okay in the way it is? Because I worry about just like, hey, give us all, yeah. So I'm worried about it being too broad.
CIO, you any further?
I guess as long as the board is not expecting a great amount of detail or backgrounders, it's just basically the various aspects of legislation that is available to us. As long as it's at that level, it probably wouldn't be a significant amount of work.
Okay. Director McMahon?
I'm wondering if do we sort of keep a list of issues we may want to take forward to AVICC and UBCM? Because medical marijuana licenses is certainly there, and so do we have a list, or do we have the corporate officers start keeping a list, or how do we do this?
I did note in the Gibson's correspondence yesterday that AVICC has sent out an invitation both to save the date and also to look at resolutions, so that perhaps that's going to be the opportunity to do that. We keep that, but keeping these ideas open. So, Director Pratt?
If we want to keep that as placeholder, though, we can actually make that motion right now to put that as to bring forward. Do you want it specific to medical marijuana, or do you want to add? We could just put it on as a placeholder right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought your motion had been seconded. First of all, we have a motion on the table. Do you want to add this motion to that then? That we no? Okay. So firstly, we have a motion on the table from which is essentially this motion from
I'll second.
Director Seegers, seconded by Director Pratt. Okay. Any further discussion of this motion? No. Okay. Director Hiltz?
Just recalling that from the discussions of the committee that it was on staff's radar, and it's somewhere embedded in the work plan already. There's something about cannabis. So if staff could maybe just give us a little where it fits into the work plan.
Is it in the work plan, CIO?
I know there was mention of it. I don't know if it's specifically in the work plan, but we can find that out for certain. And if I could just comment, if I could, Director Beamish, on the AVICC request will be coming to the board at a forthcoming meeting as well. So you would be given a primer, I guess, that there will be topics available to be submitted.
Director Lee?
I think the motion before us is relatively general, so we'll probably get general answers, high-level answers, and I think that's what I'm looking for, so that we can see what we want more detail on after that, once we see just how big it is.
Deal with this motion. There's no more discussion of this. All in favor? Thank you. And Director McMahon, did you want to pose a second recommendation at this time, or do you want to just wait and see when the ABICC information comes forward?
Horns of the dilemma. Okay. All right. I'll move that we draft a resolution for ABICC on the topic of cannabis with details to come. Medical cannabis, right.
Thank you. Seconded. Further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Approved. Yeah, further in the set of minutes is the comment at the bottom of page 127 on cameras capturing images from public spaces and video surveillance. This was not a resolution coming out of the meeting, but it was one of the looking for more information. And I wonder, with a policy to be developed, what would the board like to do with this? Okay, go to Director Hiltz.
My recollection is that it is in the work plan, so a policy is coming forth. So that's my understanding.
CAO?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. The Sherry Reid, our corporate officer, has worked on, based on the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy legislation, and it's an administrative policy, so it actually wouldn't come to the board. It's something that's done amongst the staff for our various buildings in light, especially what's happened recently in Mason Road. So that is being worked on right now.
Okay. Thank you. So nothing further needs to be done at this time. Thank you. Anything further on this set of minutes? Yeah, you're going to be happy to get rid of me. Okay, moving to Annex K, Sunshine Coast Advisory Committee and Agriculture Advisory Committee minutes, and these were from October 22nd. Anything arising from these minutes that needs to be dealt with? There's Director Seegers.
Thank you. One of the questions I had is, what is quorum for this meeting? I noticed there were only 4 actual members in attendance. Wasn't it actually a regularly constituted meeting? Was quorum actually established?
Question? Mr. Hall?
Thank you for the question, Chair. I don't have the terms of reference in front of me to be able to quote the line, but staff did check that quorum was met at the outset of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
Yeah, I'm looking at recommendation number 2, where the AAC wanted more information on soils, land quality, and water systems on Block 1313. Is that something we usually do? I'll ask staff.
Director Hall?
Thank you for the question, Chair. I guess practice with advisory committees has generally been to provide information as staff are able, and sometimes that is captured as a recommendation, particularly if it will require some staff work to collate the information. In this particular case, the item that was referred was a process piece, so it was a question about how to undertake, or how to advise BC Timber Sales to undertake, to be specific, consultation regarding this cut block on Reed Road. And so while it's helpful to know what kind of information would be of interest to those who might be asked to provide advice on this. The item is no longer on the agenda for the Agricultural Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Just for the board's information, I did point out, and just hate to point out, all of these recommendations that we have, 2, 3, 4, and 5, they're incomplete as resolutions because none of them stand alone. The headings on a resolution has no value, no merit. So in order to be an effective resolution, this should always refer back to the BC Timber Sales License number in the resolution itself. So you might want to watch those because none of these things mean anything. The agriculture, take number 2, the Agriculture Advisory Committee recommends to staff provide more information on soils, lands, quality, and water systems if certain information exists to come back to the committee. So that's on all soils, lands, and water quality conditions in Area E. So it's not, these resolutions have to be specific, so you might want to watch that through your committees and talk to them about that when they're making those recommendations. And whoever is recording needs to kind of be aware that they need to capture that level of detail in order to stand alone as a resolution. So all 4 of those need to have that reference need to be amended actually to include reference to the Timber Sales License A91376, which they're all referring to. And that's just a point that I'll leave you with as I leave. Oh, sorry, CAO?
Yes, thank you, Chair Beamish. That's an excellent point, and I observed the same thing. That's been my practice, that you should read just the resolution and 5 years from now realize what it was about. Our corporate officer, Sherry Reed, took note of that when you made that comment, and it was an excellent point. And she's going to be advising the recording secretaries accordingly.
Okay, Director McMahon?
Is Block 1313 in the ALR?
Mr. Hall?
Thank you for the question. Yes, it is.
I'm sorry, it was yes? Yes, okay. And Director Lee? Or did you have a follow-up question, Director McMahon? Sorry.
Yes, actually. Somehow that had escaped my notice. Perhaps it's because you can't, code things with 2 or 3 or 4 different land use things on a map, so I hadn't quite realized that. But do we really have very much information on things like soils, or is that something that the ALC has?
Thank you. Staff are just conferring. We don't believe that SCRD holds a lot of information on soil conditions there. There would be provincial soil maps that would relate to the parcel. And if I may, there are a number of sets of minutes included in the agenda today that include comments relating to this referral on a consultation process. And it's staff's intention to bring back an update that rolls up all the comments made along with any further information we can glean from BC Timber Sales to provide an update on this file.
Thank you. Director Lee, did you have...
Just answered my question.
Sorry?
He just...
okay, answered your question.
Mr. Hall just answered my question.
So if nothing further on this item, we'll go into Annex L, which is the Egmont Pender Harbor APC minutes. And Director Lee, did you have anything to add to these? And did you get the clarification requested on page 2?
I was just checking that. Yes, we did get the one on, however you pronounce Cappadocia. And that was my only questions that I had on this.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. See nothing further on that. Annex M. I'll go to the Half Moon Bay Advisory Planning Committee of October 22nd. Director Pratt.
Just a couple of things. The APC wanted the invasive species report brought forward to the next meeting, which is in here as well. And then the other thing was the VCTS report that they received for comment was actually last year's. I did forward them the new year, the current one. So there'll be some comments that still come from them on that after the next meeting. And then, of course, we're still looking for a recording secretary. So I don't know if I think that's already closed, but otherwise, that's all.
Director Lee.
I found this quite interesting. I noticed there was a comment on cut blocks can open the view and are okay providing replanting is carrying out. That was in regards to the Suncoaster Trail. And I'd like to say that's the general view of the people that do the trails in Area A as well. So it appears to be a common comment. And under the new business, they discussed 2 recent dock applications that were advertised in the paper but did not come to the APC. Of course, they didn't come to us either. Something seems to have happened recently because we aren't seeing any in Pender Harbor that I know applications that went in and things are happening, and we're not seeing those coming back for some reason. I was wondering if there's been a change in process or what the heck's going on.
Did you want to comment?
Yes, because those were actually advertised in the paper. I think the week of the week right before the meeting, so they hadn't even come to the SCRD yet. I asked GM Hall about it, and they've already secured a longer timeline, so we will. I mean, GM Hall can comment more on it, but we will be seeing those ones. These 2 applications in Half Moon Bay. One of them is in Sargent's Bay, so it's a huge community concern. So there's been a lot of angst in my community about that, and but it'll be coming forward to a future meeting because GM Hall's already secured a longer deadline. So it will be coming to the APC, I would imagine, later this. But we have the GM here, so I don't need to speak for him.
Do you have anything further to add, Mr. Hall? Director Lee.
So just a little clarification then. We don't see the applications. We only see a referral prior to a decision being made. Is that correct?
Mr. Hall?
When applications are made for provincial tenure, for example, for private moorage, they're typically advertised in the paper, which is sometimes where staff see them first. And then an information package is provided by the province, most typically, although as noted earlier in the meeting, sometimes directly from an applicant to the SCRD. And there's a timeline for response provided. And in order to synchronize with our committee and board agenda, the first thing that staff often do is request an extension in order to be able to bring it forward to our next available meeting and also to take it to our advisory planning commissions.
Director Lee?
Yeah, the applications, well, there is a contentious one in Half Moon that's being dealt with, but there's also one in the Pender Harbor area that's being dealt with by the applicant and the province, and there's back and forth and back and forth. These are the ones I'd like to see come to us first for comments. So this is something we probably should be looking out for. The issue in Pender Harbor is that it's they've now got a process where they will only approve docks that are shared by multiple people. So now you come into an instance of access to the shared dock through multiple private properties. And how do you do it? And how do you make it fair? And all these things that you can imagine happens. I, in turn, would like to see it so that there is a process and so we can get it done because it's a good idea. But we've never had an opportunity to investigate the best way of doing that. Is it right-of-ways? Is it what kind of right-of-ways? Those kind of things. And I think our staff's best placed to answer that. And so the wrong people are dealing with it right now, in my opinion. So I think we need to address that in the future. It's a planning issue in my mind and a local planning issue. But anyways, that's a comment.
From that to Annex N, Area E, Elphinstone Advisory Planning Committee, October 23rd, 2019. Director McMahon.
I noticed it came up here and somewhere else that groups asked for items to be referred to a community association. Now, I know the District of Scheldt does that quite often, but I don't think that has been the practice at the FCRD. And I'd be interested in any comment on that. It didn't occur to me to refer this to the Elphinstone Community Association, although they certainly want to talk about it. We already refer things to the APC, so how would that be different, and has that been done in the past?
Director Seegers.
Okay. We have community associations throughout the District of Scheldt. I think there's, 7? Something like that. Something like that. 7 community associations. And then we have the Advisory Planning Commission. So when something's happening in a community, we do, as practice, refer it out to that community association. The APC represents the whole community, but we're looking at more localized feedback. So it would depend on what the makeup is of your community association and your APC for your area. Are they both representing the same group of people? Then you may not want to refer to them, or you might want to. I don't know.
Just speaking on Gibson's as well, we have one community association which we have started referring things to, and I understand there's a second one perhaps being developed now. So I really support the community association concept when things are happening in a neighborhood.
Yeah. It is an interesting issue for a number of reasons. Our community association doesn't meet, for instance, in December and I think July and August, so that might, be difficult in terms of timelines. For Elphinstone right now, I can't see an urgent need to refer things to the community association. It might be simpler to notify the community association that something's coming to the APC, and I could do that so that they could come to the APC. There were quite a few people came to this particular meeting. But I'm thinking about Area F, for instance. There are community associations galore, and they are very specific, like, for Gambier Island and things. So I can see that if there is an issue, that in that case it might be appropriate to refer it.
Director Seegers.
Again, when we refer out, it is for things like bylaws that have a referral process, development permits that have a referral process, right? So it's not everything gets referred to them. It's only those things that we're actually doing referrals on. So it would get referred to the APC, to the fire department, to the regional district, to the community association, right? So they would have that 30-day process. We also require that they keep us informed as to each year, once they have their nominations, who the contact people are. So it's not up to us to keep that up. It's up to them to ensure we know who they are for those referrals to happen.
Director Lee.
Yes, it's a very interesting conversation. I just scribbled mine down. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I can think of 8 off the top of my head. I have a question of Director Seegers. The council decides who to refer to, or staff, or you have pre?
Our process automatically has the community association. So our referral sheet, on the referral sheet, it actually has who could be referred to, and the community associations are listed there. And if it is in a particular area, they're just automatically referred. Staff does that. It's just part of our process. Yeah, we can add, I mean, as we do here too, at times we'll say, well, we also want it to go to this group, right? So we can add to that, but those are the basic ones that are automatically referred to.
Director Lee?
So it would seem like in the rural areas, if we would prefer to have referrals to multiple advisory groups, we need to establish a list for our staff groups. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Director McMahon?
I just raised it as something that we could give some thought to. I'm not ready to make a motion or anything to that effect. And I think that staff have covered off everything that the APC recommended as part of their coming back to us with advice on the consultation process.
Director Ties?
Well, if anyone's interested in either adding a whole bunch of workload or maybe subtracting some workload, you can always do a standing OCP committee. That's
Director Seegers?
So the other side of that is if you are wanting to consider referring them to those organizations, you have to make sure that those organizations know what to do with a referral and are willing to take that on and have the capacity to deal with that. When I was in Calgary, I was in my community association, and the City of Calgary actually has a one-year training program for anybody from a community association who would, before they will even let you go on as the referral person from a community association. And it's things like, you have to take certain courses on the planning process and what a development permit is, etc. So it's a one-year process before your community association can put you forward as the contact. They won't allow you to go on the list before then because they want to ensure that the referral comments that you give back are relevant and part of, and actually have value.
Director McMahon, is there anything rising out of this set of minutes that you wanted to bring attention to? I see that the recommendation number 3, they wanted to encourage the regional district get on with a regional growth strategy and a land management resource plan.
The APC and the folks who attended that meeting had lots of advice for us. And I think we're already moving forward on the regional growth strategy front, so I'm pretty happy.
That ends the list, so that we now have communications. There are none. We have new business. There is none. We are going to adjourn to in camera. Motion to adjourn in camera, and that is to the public be excluded from attendance at meetings in accordance with Section 90(1)A of the Community Charter. Personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality or other position appointed by the municipality. It's been moved, seconded. All in favor? Okay. So that motion, we need to invite the press to have any questions. Connie? CAO, are you able to respond to that?
I will have to double check with Matt.
That will be on the agenda this afternoon, I believe.
That's correct, yes.
That's correct, so we'll clarify that. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Other questions? Sophie, nothing? Darnella, do you have any questions? Okay, we are going to go in camera then. Thank you.